Dr. Nan, in a few words, why does good sex truly matter in our lives?
Well, the reason why good sex matters is that the ability to experience pleasure in our bodies, with our bodies, whether it's sexual or not, is key to a well functioning emotional brain.
Oh,
So, pleasure is not a luxury. We have a very strange relationship in this country, in America, with pleasure. I call us lewd, prude nation. We're obsessed with sex, but very few people are actually having very good sex. We have a very strange relationship with our sexual selves. We don't want to talk about it. Number one problem when it comes to sex is people do not want to talk about sex. There was a actual article in the New York Times a few weeks back where they said people would prefer to get divorced than to talk about their
really?
sex lives.
Wow.
Yes. So, when I say good sex matters, I'm not telling people that they should have sex. There's some people who just don't feel like having sex. What I'm saying is that when we're not having sex, when we want to, or when we're not wanting to have sex, it's always good to look into that's like a window into what's happening with our brain minds, our emotional brain minds. And a lot of times when people are having sexual issues, lack of desire, problems having sex, it's reflecting some way that they're out of balance in their core
Mm.
emotional systems that I write about
Yes,
in the
and
book.
I wanted to get to that because in your book, Why Good Sex Matters, you emphasize the importance of our core emotions in maintaining the physical and mental well being. So, what happens if there are imbalances? You already talked a bit about it, but can you explain to us?
Well, the reason why core emotions and understanding them is so important is that up until now, we really have not, in psychology or medicine, dealt with the fact that we're wired with emotional
Mm.
instincts. And these emotional instincts are there for us to survive. So we have one system called the seeking system, which is powered by dopamine. The job of the seeking system is to get us motivated to search and meet our needs in the environment. So the seeking system is really about exploring, enthusiasm, motivation to getting our needs met. And unfortunately, that system, the seeking system, gets hijacked by our lifestyle, particularly by devices, social media. It's really, really bad for
We
the
get
brain
lazy.
mind. Then we
Mhm.
and we get
Mm.
hijacked. So the dopamine that we would be spending on searching for connection and being with people in the room gets depleted by being on social media and having these algorithms kind of keeping us, doom scrolling,
Mm.
liking all of this stuff. I call it faux, like false, FAUX, social. It's not real
Mm.
social. So we've got the seeking system. I'll unpack the systems, I think, to start, which makes what'll
Yes,
make sense
because
for your
that was super
listeners.
interesting in your book, like the several systems. So if you can explain to us.
Yeah, so the seeking system is what gets us powered up to be motivated and meet our needs. Then we have the defensive systems, which are about protection. We have fear, and we're wired to feel fear. You don't have to teach a newborn baby to be afraid of pain. It's wired in, right? So we have fear, which is designed to keep us away from things that are
Hmm. So it's a
dangerous,
good
right?
thing.
We have rage. It's a good thing that system, when that system gets disrupted by brain damage, people are very, very impaired. We need that feedback. The next defensive system is rage. So when someone steps on our toes, either literally or figuratively, when they're threatening, us, we get the rage information to protect our boundaries, to sometimes fight back, to do what we need to do for our survival. And then in terms of the last but not least of the defensive systems, my personal favorite, has a long name. It's called panic, grief,
Yes. Mm.
sadness. And what that system is designed to do, Camille, is to keep us connected to our social networks, to our families. We're mammals, and mammals need for
Connection.
survival to be connected, right? And for babies, I have five
Wow.
grandchildren. I have two little ones underneath a year. Their survival is literally hinged on us taking care of them. So the panic grief sadness system is designed to keep us close to our our resources. And actually, when that system, you asked about what's happening
Yes.
when they're out of balance. When that system is out of balance, we can experience depression. We can experience, shall we say, insecure attachment style when we're
Hmm.
so worried about our relationships that we are actually challenged. It can also create anxiety. So, that panic, grief, sadness system is the source of our heartbreak. When we lose somebody, when we feel grief, I've lost both my parents
Mm.
this year, and the grief reaction is activation of that panic, grief, sadness system. We feel it in our bodies. So now we're going to turn to the social or affiliative emotions. We've got care. Care is what drives us to take care of our young, to be connected to our partners, friends, the world. It's powered by our own internally produced opioids. Our brain makes these substances. It's the source of our feeling good with and through our social connections. So, you know how they studied this in animals,
Mm.
because animals can't tell us what they feel. Jaak Panksepp, who's the founder of the field of affective neuroscience, the neuroscience of emotions, he worked with animals. And when you stimulate those circuits, you get those behaviors. So, for example, when you stimulate the care system, the animals like it and they'll work
Mm.
to keep that stimulation. When you stimulate the seeking system, the animals really like that because the stimulation of that system feels really good. Those are the reward pathways we used to
Mm.
talk about, that seeking system. So when you are feeling care, and animals will work to turn off stimulation of fear because it doesn't feel good, rage, and also panic, grief,
Mm.
sadness. They vote with their
Mm.
paws, what they'll work to turn on or work to turn off. Because people always ask me, how did they figure this out in animals? All mammals have those same systems, and even to some extent, other non
Okay.
mammals. So we talked
Mhm.
about care. Another affiliative system is play. Play is the source of social joy. We're having a big problem with Gen Z. Gen Z is the first generation that was raised
Mm.
on the
Mhm.
phone, the smartphones. So they did not get enough rough and tumble play. They spent more time on their devices and on the internet than they did with actually rough and tumble play with their peers. And we've gotten very uptight about things like touch and roughhousing. So we've overprotected kids in the real world. We didn't let them explore. Like when I was a kid, kids went out and
Yeah.
played, and they would go out and play, and sometimes fall off,
The tree.
the climbing gym. They would survive, right? And and now we're underprotective of children on the internet. So as a result, the Gen Z, so the smartphone came out in 2010, when kids were raised on that without the rough and tumble play that they need for learning competition and cooperation. That's how mammals learn the
Mm.
life skills that they need for hunting and mating and all that. Even a lab rat needs some social skills to get laid. So, Gen Z has tremendous amounts of anxiety.
Yes.
There's a book out called The Anxious Generation, Jonathan Haidt. You're
No,
familiar
but
with that
I'm
book?
writing down. Interesting.
Yes, he talks about how the biggest experiment in humankind on our children has happened, and the results have not been great. Gen Z is having a
Yeah,
rough,
and it's
rough
scary.
time.
It's scary as a parents, and
Oh,
you were saying like with the imbalance of our emotion can lead to issues like anxiety, depression. Like since we are on our phone, we are
exactly.
like we're bathed with dopamine, so we're not seeking anymore. How we can reverse
Right.
that as adults and maybe with the kids?
Well, yeah. So the last affiliative system, last but not least, is lust, the urge to merge. That circuitry does not become available when people don't feel
Yes.
safe. So, if, and what we see also, the play circuits are not available when people don't
Hmm.
feel safe. So, because we're so anxious, we don't have the same access to the play circuitry. And a lot of adults, that gets flattened. And you know what? One of the conditions that I think are the condition that's least understood by most people, that is underneath all of our mental health challenges, is what's known as anhedonia, the inability to have
Hmm.
pleasure. So when we have activations of the defenses and we don't have access to play, we don't have access to lust, and even the care system can sort of dampened, and the seeking system can go flat because we're spending all of our dopamine on our social media, and the signaling that the dopamine is supposed to be doing is
Hmm.
not working. So as a result, we've got anhedonia, which is worsened by stress. And that is a condition that underlies depression, anxiety, all sorts of mental health
Hmm.
challenges, sexual wellness, physical well being, you name it.
Yes.
Anhedonia
And hmm.
is a epidemic that we've been experiencing as a result of I guess, the hijacking of the core
Yes, and as you were
emotions.
saying, also in our society, we are like, doing automatic mode, and we are not into our bodies. We are not into our, mindful. We are not mindfulness and mindful, and we are just into our brain and thinking and thinking. Um, but how do we get access to lust and play? Because I think they are like the systems that are the best for us, maybe, or one of the best.
Yes. So the way that we can do that is that there's basically, the most important thing is to step away from your
It's
phone.
difficult.
So yeah, it's difficult and it's
Mm.
really good for you. So limiting how much time you use your phone so that you're more available. The reason why that's important, I want to explain a little bit about what dopamine is supposed to do when it's working. There's actually two sort of functions to dopamine. One is it's the dopamine that we have that signals when something feels good. Like, so the signal, like you get a little bit
Mm.
of juice. They've studied the neurons it was actually in monkeys. So when monkeys got a little juice, their dopamine signals go, woohoo, feels good, right? So the dopamine neurons step up. And that is a learning signal. And what happens is, for example, if there is a signal like a light or an experimenter walking into the room to give them the juice, the dopamine neurons start to spike when they see the
Mm.
predictor of the reward, not just at the reward itself. That's the prediction error functioning
It's
of
anticipation
dopamine.
of pleasure, would you say? Okay.
Exactly. Anticipation of pleasure, reward. And hopefully, it's rewards that feel good and are good for us, healthy
Mm.
hedonism. So, for example, eating a bag of Doritos might feel good, not good for us. So, what's happened, like getting likes on social media can feel good, but it's not really good for us. It's it screws up the ability because we're kind of putting the pedal to the floor of the dopamine system, flooding our systems with dopamine to the point that the signaling, that there's a level of dopamine that's like the background dopamine, And then there should be the brain should be able to detect the spark, the increase in the dopamine in anticipation of the reward. That no
Mm.
longer works because we're flooded with dopamine. There's no
Mm.
difference in the signaling. And then guess what happens? The dopamine
Mm.
goes flat. We're using up our dopamine. And then the dopamine actually gets hijacked to the stress hormones to produce stress hormones.
When you're talking about this, I don't know if we can relate to this, but when I hear couples saying that they are lazy now to have sex, is it because they don't have the anticipation of pleasure anymore? And they can't, get the seeking mode and have the juice and have the anticipation. They are more into, oh, they don't have the signals anymore.
Exactly. That's very, very good, Camille. You got it. There's the signaling system is
Yeah.
not working. And where we're putting our attention, we're getting hijacked. They pay people a lot of money, attentional engineers to do the
Yeah.
algorithms. There's a wonderful Netflix
Yes.
documentary called The
Network.
Social
Ah,
Dilemma.
yeah. Oh,
Social
yeah.
Dilemma, I think it's
Dilemma. Yeah.
called. And it's actually the people who made the
Mhm.
algorithms are
Yeah.
scared of them now, and they say they don't let their
Exactly.
kids anywhere near
Yes.
any of that, right? So, and I will tell you, I go on social media because I'm promoting my services and promoting my book, and I notice that even I knowing about this, I sometimes get like kind of pulled into it, and I feel awful. I go, where did that half an hour or 45 minutes of my life go? You get presented with all of these quick things that get your attention, that keep you going. It's like empty
Mhm.
calories is really how I describe it. So, getting back to the imbalances in the core
Yes.
emotions and how that is creating so many of the challenges that we're having, is that we know there's actually genetics that can predispose us to having certain issues. For
Addiction.
example, with our reward circuitry, yeah, that make us predisposed. And then we're having experiences, whether it's childhood trauma or trauma in life, or spending a lot of time traumatizing ourselves on social media, where the systems are not working
Mm.
properly. And if you have a predisposition to addiction, for example, and you're spending time with these these empty calories, and there's not one day of the week that I got somebody, every day somebody's calling me with porn addiction. And it's like they're just, their brains are getting
Mm.
hijacked, the systems are getting hijacked. So, what we know is that some people, based on just their genetics, may be predisposed to imbalances. I just published a paper that actually won a big
Ah,
award,
congratulations.
an international award, on unpacking affective neuroscience for people in sexual medicine and clinical practices. There's increasing bodies of research that show that imbalances in these systems contribute to depression, anxiety disorder, mental health challenges, all sorts of issues, including psychosis, personality disorders. These kind of mental health challenges then impact our sexual and physical well-being, so that the more that we can understand the role that the imbalances in the core emotions plays in hijacking attention, and also creating habits that are not
Mm.
healthy, where we're
Yeah.
chasing the the likes, or we're chasing the calories that are empty, whether we're overeating, over drinking, over social
Mm.
mediating. Is
I don't
that a
know, but I like the name.
mediaing? That what we're doing is we're creating unhealthy
How can we
habits.
create healthy habits? So you were saying limiting, the phones?
Limiting social
Hmm.
media. There's three simple steps that I teach my clients. Number one is get off social media. Number two is pay attention to your body. So, what you want to do is be able to notice what's happening in your body. We know often what's going on
Hmm.
in our minds, right? And people are like on sticks when I talk to them. What's happening in your body? If I ask them that, they go, "What?" Well, I'm mad. How do you know that? What's happening in your body? So, becoming attuned to our bodies and then also adjusting something as simple as how we
Mhm.
breathe so that we can alter the tonality of the autonomic nervous system, which is what drives all of our behaviors, the autonomic nervous system. Most of us, most of the time, are in that flight or fight segment, which is the stress hormones and all of that. What we want to do is to help that balance into the calming portion of the nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system. And would you believe one very basic, easy breath to learn can really help? If you extend your exhalation a little bit longer than your
Oh, yeah.
inhale. So let's say you're breathing in 1, 2, 3, 4. And then when you exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4,
Mhm.
5, what you do is you activate what's called the vagal brake, which is part of the parasympathetic nervous system that will slow your heart
Mm.
rate when you're exhaling, and that restores something called cardiac variability, which is the healthy normal heart in somebody who is well emotionally
Mhm.
balanced exhibits cardiac variability. It speeds up when they breathe in and it slows down when they breathe out. That normal rhythm in somebody who is a well balanced person is a healthy rhythm. Those of us who have a lot of
Mm.
anxiety, I have a lot of anxiety
Mm.
constitutionally. Some of it's probably a little bit of genetic, and the other is having had grown up in a household where my mom had really big emotional
Mm.
problems. She was undiagnosed borderline personality. We saw this play out as she got older and she was diagnosed. Your alarm systems, fear, panic, grief,
Activated.
sadness, and for some people, rage, activated. So you're always vigilant. Like, you're waiting for, you have to, keep looking around. But when you slow down the out breath and make it longer, what you're telling your body is
Safe.
that you're
Mhm.
safe. And would you believe that the biggest trauma experts, I'm talking about like the people who are the
Mhm.
big people in the field, really say that the first step in recovering from trauma, whether it's big capital T trauma or everyday traumas, is teaching your body to feel safe in the moment, which in
Mm.
fact you are. So, really, what is the definition of trauma? Something in the past kind of bleeding into the present, right? It's in our bodies. So we can, if you take yourself off of getting hijacked by social media, and we spend time at the
Yes.
computer. I work at the computer. It can't be helped, but we need to be in our bodies to breathe and also to do a lot of
Mm.
self-soothing. So I just wrote a piece yesterday for on election anxiety and how for Psychology Today, how we can help
Okay.
ourselves, how we can learn from it. There's some wonderful research showing that self
Mm.
touch can do much to break that cortisol, the stress reaction. Put your hand on your one hand on your heart, the other on your belly, and then do
Mm.
that breath that I recommend. Long, smooth inhale, long, smooth exhale, and use the smart parts of your mind, the top mind, to suggest that you're safe, that you're calm, that you can be compassionate. You can do 20-second practices like that, that you can put into your day whenever you're noticing. I tell people, begin to notice when your
Mhm.
shoulders are up here or you're holding your breath, when you're noticing that you're tense, and you condition yourself the minute that you notice tension in your mind or tension in your body, the long, smooth inhale and the longer, smooth exhalation. If you can do both through your nostrils, that has a calming effect. If you can't, it's okay, but it's like, long, smooth inhale, longer, smooth exhalation. And I actually reconditioned my nervous
Like this.
system, Camille. And I'll tell you my claim to fame story with this. I used to have panic attacks. I write about that in my book, terrible panic attacks. And then I had, I would describe myself as a relatively anxious person, although I was always very social and wanted to have fun. I used to suffer from public
Mm.
speaking anxiety, which is probably the number one fear. I was able to condition myself with and through using the basic breath, and I unpack in my book some more bells and whistles I learned from yoga that you can do with the breath, the bandhas, the energy locks. I have videos on my website for that. That by the time, and I did a lot of public speaking, I went back to graduate school for the PhD at
Oh,
age
wow.
50 after my
Congratulations.
left.
50.
I was a clinician for like probably 25 years at that point, and I'm like, my
It's
kids are gone.
inspiring. Mm.
I had the opportunity to be able to study the brain with non-invasive techniques that were not available when I was in my first go round with graduate school in the 80s. So I was able to go back to grad school, and because I was practicing doing so many talks, that by the time my book launch, which was in 2020, talk about the time right around the pandemic, I was on the Today Show talking to Maria Shriver and a wonderful gynecologist, Jessica Shepard. I sat in the green room, did my breathing. I wasn't even the least
Mm.
bit nervous.
Nice.
Talk about a
Mm.
credibility story. I was so present and having such a good time talking with those ladies about the importance of female pleasure. And then 2 days later, New York was shut down with the pandemic. We were on the next to last day of
Mm.
live shows from the
Thank you
city.
for sharing your story. It's
So
very inspiring, and maybe I will go back to PhD later on in life. But it speaks to me because I was a very anxious person as well. I was scared of everything, and as you, I try to self smooth myself and breathing. So yeah, thank you for sharing this because it's going to inspire also other people who feel like very anxious, nervous, that feel they can't do much into their social life, and I think it can help. Yeah.
my next book, tentatively titled It's Never Too Late to Have a Happy Childhood and Here's How, is going to be unpacking the core emotions and the how the brain mind works for us to update our emotional systems after having a little bit or maybe
Mm.
more than a little bit of rough rides in childhood.
Want to read it? Yes. So what you were saying, just to do a resume, to resume the healthy habits, which is limit the social media as much as possible, and we know the impact, of course, of this. Pay attention to your body, yourself, breathing longer, slower, and self smooth. I never know how to pronounce it. Self smoothing. It's hard for me to pronounce it. Smoothing.
Self-soothing. Well, it could be smoothing and
True.
soothing. Yeah. And I'll add a couple of other things. We need to move our bodies.
Especially with trauma, apparently.
And
With trauma, you really need to move your body.
oh,
Hmm.
get it out of our bodies. But the number one issue that we're having is we're too sedentary. That's the number one. Between being stressed out and sedentary, all of our lifestyle diseases. This is like, inflammation that feeds our cardiovascular illnesses and cancer and all that. And there's one thing that I also tell people, which is a real must: get out every day and get some sunshine into your eyes, because natural sunlight, when it goes into the eyes, goes directly from the eye all the way to the hypothalamus, which is runs all of our body processes: sleep, eating, regulation of all of our body functioning, sex,
Mm.
everything. So we're not getting enough natural light. We're not getting enough movement. And, I try every day to take a walk and to be around trees, a park, nature. It's so important for our mental health. So prioritizing pleasures that feel good and are good for us. So it can be moving our bodies, it could be masturbating, it can be connecting with other people. It's really, for me, it's been a real journey to learn how to prioritize
Mhm.
pleasure and to feel that I give myself permission every day to find something that I enjoy that feels good. And that can be challenging for people who do have anhedonia, where they're having a really hard time with anything feeling good, with maybe the exception of substances or, food,
Yeah.
or, they're trying behind every problematic behavior, Camille, is underneath it is a positive intention. So if we listen to what are we really trying to do that's positive for ourselves with these
Mhm.
unhealthy patterns or behaviors, rather than judging or making ourselves wrong, we get curious using the seeking system. We get playful and caring, and then being able to be curious, caring, and playful, we can get
Yes, yes.
creative.
The permission to take care of ourselves. And what really helped me when I was in immediate postpartum, which makes me really feeling good about myself in a time that maybe I was not feeling necessarily good in my body, was to take 15 minutes at the end of the day with no baby to take care of and just taking a shower and being very conscious about it. Maybe putting a little bit of music and I can move my body. And really, I call it the queen shower to really feel my body, feel the water into my body, the temperature, really being present.
That's wonderful. That's a great practice. And I think what's challenging for women generally more than men is women kind of get trained to think of our bodies as
Mhm.
objects. So it's all about, how does my body look? Is my body okay? And mostly people are feeling they compare their bodies to airbrushed,
Social
you
media
know,
pictures.
social media stuff, and they're feeling, what I really encourage people to do is not feel good about their bodies, not to like get it, feel, to learn to feel good in their bodies. So whatever, like you said, getting a warm shower, hot shower with music, whatever gets you to feel good in your body, to be embodied. Now, I'll tell you something, that one of the things that, I'm involved with now, this is a little off
Okay.
the topic, but it really isn't. One of the biggest issues for women is lack of active sexual desire, where they're horny and they know it. That can happen when we have children. That can happen when we're in long term relationships. The male brain and the female brain are a bit different when it comes to the circuits, sensitive to the sex hormones. So that's where you see, and this happens embryologically, developmentally, that the brain of most males, not every male, but most males have more circuits where the sex hormones can dock, so that if you look across cultures, men want more sex, men want more kinds of sex. And in long term relationships, it's more common for women to lose active sexual desire, where they're horny and they know it, than it is
And
male
and with this,
men.
do you think is hormonal related, brain related, or cultural related, or maybe all of them? All of them.
All
Okay,
of
okay.
it, all of it. So we have a predisposition in the sense of, we have less circuit sensitive to the sex hormones in our brains. So it's like we have less sex on the brain. The two times that women have very high active sexual desire, and I make the distinction between active and the
Hmm.
responsive, receptive desire,
Yes.
which is, can get jump started maybe with a little vibration or something really good happening. When I got my book deal, I was so happy. I was horny as hell. It was
I,
like, that was what turned me on, right? The
yes.
good book deal. But what I was trying to say here is that it's common over long term relationship for women, certainly around childbirth, because the high degree of
Hmm.
care, you're using your care system, that actually highly activated care systems will cock block lust. Think about when people are shooting up opioids, are they getting
No.
horny? No. Our body's putting out all these opioids as a
Right.
result of our
And that's why we
caretaking.
see also in
That
couple where they share, like responsibilities and care, they are like more satisfied sexually.
exactly, exactly. So it's natural for women to be more horny at 2 points in their life cycle. One is in new relationships. So when you have new relationship energy, it's like a chemical explosion in the brain, and it's kind of like, I call it biological highlighter. It gets our attention on
Mm.
the person. So we want them. We're thinking about it. It can actually border on, if things aren't going well, it can be painful and ruminative, like kind of like OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. The chemistry of new relationship energy, though, often is associated with high active sexual desire for both
Mm.
men and women. For women, the other time, even after the new relationship energy wears off, and that kind of the loss of desire is really an artifact. If you think about it, I write about this in my book, because if you're comparing the sexual desire you had at peak new relationship energy with what you're having after you've habituated to the partner, 18 months to 36 months down the line, you're going to see a big fall off. But if you go and you compare it instead to the baseline desire you had prior to the new relationship energy, it's not going to look like such
Mm.
a loss. So, the other time that women tend to have higher active desire is ovulation. They tend to initiate sex more during ovulation, even if they're not looking to get pregnant. So, I like to understand the biopsychosocial of all of this stuff so that we can like understand it. Once we understand it, we can work with it. But where I was going, if it's okay, was I was going to talk about medical
Mm.
marijuana. So, for loss of active sexual desire, there are many women who are saying that if they use a little bit of marijuana, they feel more embodied. They feel more in touch with their active sexual desire. And the other thing is with female orgasm disorder, when women have trouble having orgasms, there's been some good research on that the use of, and I'm not talking about the same amounts that you need to get
Mm.
really high as a kite. I'm talking about like
Okay.
medicinal
Mm.
levels, which are lower, that women can find their orgasms, or their orgasms can find them better. So I'm busy now petitioning states to help include first female orgasm disorder as a condition for prescription of medical
Ah.
marijuana, because it really can be very helpful. Now there's some people that they wouldn't want to use it, that's fine, but here we have a substance that we know, and we don't have really any good actual medications. I've talked about some of these
Mm.
prescription medications they give for desire, that they're really not very effective and they have a lot of side effects. So here we have something that can be used for some women to help them turn up the volume on their sensation channel. That's what marijuana does. I also talk about an exercise in my book about how do we turn up the volume on the
Mhm.
sensation channel for people who are men who are having issues with um,
Gluten. Mhm.
erectile dysfunction, women who are having trouble with desire or orgasms, is to alternate touching the body part with thinking about touching the body part. So when you touch, you're stimulating the connections between that body part and the place in the brain that receives and processes sensations that communicate with all the areas that contribute to the big bang of orgasm, the pleasurable feelings in the orgasm. And when you think about touching that area, you're using your mind. So thinking about that uses your mind to strengthen those pathways for pleasure. I showed in my research that my participants, just thinking about having a dildo inserted, their brains lit up, like look like an orgasm brain. Not when they were imagining having a speculum
Mhm.
inserted for like a for a pelvic exam. So the point being is that we can use the mind to create more
Mm.
learning, more connection between focusing on sensations in the body can turn up that
Mm.
volume.
Brain is the most sexual organ at the end. Mm.
Exactement.
And there's something I like also what you say in your book because you portray sexuality in menopause in a more positive matter. You know, usually we say, oh, everything decreased, there's a lot of problem, issues. You are not saying that. You mentioned that menopause can be a time for sexual renewal due to hormonal changes. Usually when we talk about menopause, sexuality and hormones, it's not in a good way. So how does this shift
Right.
impact a woman's life?
So there's no question that basically during menopause, our ovaries, we have like they shut down or they stop functioning. So we do have like endocrine
Mm.
failure when it comes to the ovaries. However, nobody needs to suffer because you can get, if you want, hormone replacement therapy. And I would love for you to have on your show my colleague who specializes, she's an OBGYN. I just wrote a piece with her. We just got interviewed about menopause and
Mm.
all of the good things that can happen as a result of it. Maureen Slattery. I'll
Send it to me.
suggest her to show. So she is so terrific about like to educate women how during the periods of symptoms, and some women have a lot of symptoms, that you can get relief with and through hormone replacement. Actually, marijuana has been shown to help with this, with the period of adjustment. But I want to highlight that your body does adjust. So on the other side of menopause, your body actually your brain makes more receptors for estrogen. There are a lot of compensatory
And with
mechanisms, and that
hormonal therapy or even without hormonal therapy?
oh,
Okay.
without hormonal therapy, your brain will make more estrogen receptors as part of the accommodation to your body
Mm.
adjusts. I, on the other side of menopause, have absolutely no symptoms. I don't take any. While I was going through menopause, I used some bioidentical hormones that my doctor was willing to prescribe, which really got me through. And after I was done, I didn't need anything. And I presented this year to Stanford's geriatric psychiatry department on sex and aging. And one of the fun things we talked about is that nowadays older women are reporting having better sex than some young people, because we were raised when there was, think about it, in the 60s, when it was like free
Mhm.
love and fun and birth control, and there isn't that whole specter of them taking away abortion after. There's a lot of things going wrong for people sexually, but as we age, we can develop less preoccupation with how our
Mm.
bodies look. We could say, hey, it's my body. I feel good in it. We're more confident. We can have better relationships. And recent studies have shown that women are actually reporting really
Yeah.
enjoying their sex lives. If they haven't the map that you're supposed to go into sexual retirement, because some women
Yes.
have that map.
Because
And the other
media
big
and
factor,
society portrays this as well.
yes, right. Like, and we have this awful belief that old equals ugly
Yes.
for women and not for men, which is so
It's
unfair.
unfair.
So women are sold this bill of goods that our bodies are for
Mm.
other people. And we're only sexy as long as we're in reproductive age. I remember when I was doing my PhD, so I started when I was 50, and we made a film of my using the data from my brain of a brain orgasm. I think I was 54 at that time. Somebody made a comment. It actually broke the internet. It was such a we did this for Society for Neuroscience. So there was a scientific reason that we showed what was going on in the brain during orgasm. Somebody made a comment and said, like in the comments, gee, it would be hot if she wasn't 54. So this is the thinking that old equals ugly. If we reject that and reject the ageism and that there's a sort of expiration date on our sexuality. We can have sex. And what people can learn is even as they might have some symptoms or maybe a little harder to have an orgasms, or maybe the orgasms aren't as strong,
Mm.
that our ability to connect, our ability to be in our bodies and to have fun, actually, we can expand our idea. We don't have to have penis, vagina sex and heterosexual couples. We can learn to activate the play system, the care system, the seeking system, and the less system, and have a whole lot of fun till the day that we die.
And we need to think as a woman, we live longer in the phase of menopause than in a phase when we have our period. So we need to enjoy this phase because
Yeah.
it's the longest one.
And you know what? I don't miss bleeding. I don't miss my hormonal changes that I did have with mood and stuff. You, on the other side, people focus on menopause. It's the end. It's the beginning of the next leg of the
I like
journey.
it. Thank you, Dr. Nan. I
Hmm.
have a last question because we have a lot of sexologists and sex therapists listening to this episode. And I wonder what kind of advice you would like to give to them in terms of what they could how they could explain to their patients, their clients, how brain works when it's related to sexual pleasure. How the brain's response to sexual pleasure, how we can explain in a very easy way because we are not neuroscience.
Right. So, ideally, the sensations from the genitals are going to be received in the brain, and it's going to activate the territory of what I call the brain's crotch, the genital sensory cortex, that communicates with so many parts of the brain to bring increased blood flow, so that from the point of either thinking about sex or starting to have genital stimulation, it creates really great activation and blood flow to so many areas of the brain that it's the best exercise for the brain. And the key is if we can help our clients tune into the sensation channel, and if we can be informed by understanding that if their defensive systems are activated, they're not going to be feeling safe and relaxed enough to enjoy the sexual connection and the stimulation. And that ultimately, if we see ourselves as prioritizing our pleasure, and that we can understand that the ability to experience pleasure is wired into the brain. What we need to get out of the way is, for example, people have like sexual traumas or things that have happened, that we can deal with that to update. We don't even have to unpack the stories around the traumas. We can learn to train ourselves in present time to feel safe, and once we feel safe, we can tune into the sensation channel, and we can connect deeply with ourselves and each other. I'm not sure that's the
Yes,
answer you were looking for about what
I like the
happens in the
beginning of the
brain.
sentence. I think it's very easy to explain this, and the rest of the sentence is more for information. So yes, yes, it's respond to it. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Okay.
Yes.
My
Thank you very
pleasure.
much, Dr. Nan, for your time and sharing with us all your knowledge. And I highly recommend your book also, which is Why Good Sex
Thank you.
Matters. And when is the date of the releasing of your new book?
Oh, I'm just about to
Ah,
start
okay. So,
writing it. So the first thing I've been working on is
mm,
a memoir. So that's spilling out of me. So, like in this past year, between the death of my parents and the birth of two new grandchildren, I've been reassessing the decisions I made about myself and the world based on my childhood, and getting rid of having to work so hard, having to get permission from other people to be who I am, to feel more connected with pleasure, more relaxed, and just more accepting of
nice.
me. So it's been a really wonderful, wonderful process. So I'm writing that memoir now, which is going to be talking about, my
Okay.
history. And then I'm going to start the next book in January with my co writer.
Ah,
So that book is going to be more of a
mm.
guide. how you can navigate how you can figure out what's out of balance in the core emotions and how you can update that. So anybody who listens to your podcast can jump on my
Yes.
website, ask Dr. Nan, and get a free session with me. They let me know they can get a free
Nice.
full
Very
session.
nice. Thank you so much, Dr. Nan. I'm very happy now you can feel yourself, be yourself, feeling free. So this is what we wish for everyone, right?
Yeah, right. Full permission to be as we are, full permission to be what is so, whatever is, and then to be able to, it's not resignation, but then to take charge of what we can impact in a way that feels good and is good for
Thank
us.
you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. This was such a lovely, easy, breezy, fun conversation, Camille.